A group was created in America called the Project for the New American Century. It was the Neocon organization, the one behind the Republican Party. It was co-founded by Robert Kagan and William Kristol, and in it was Dick Cheney, who would become de facto president with Bush, Rumsfeld, who would be head of the Pentagon, the Defense Department, his deputy, Wolfowitz, Dov Zakheim, who controlled the entire budget of the Pentagon as comptroller, and this man, John Bolton, who's never seen a country he didn't want to bomb. And in September 2000, this lot produced a document. In this document, they called for American forces to fight and decisively win multiple simultaneous major theater wars. They named the countries: Iraq, Libya, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, North Korea, China. Nothing changes a status quo quicker or more permanently than a war. So, status quo, you have a war, new status quo. You have another war, new status quo. And each one's taking you nearer and nearer to your goal, which is the global centralization of power. How many people do you know that want a war? Hardly anybody. But we have them all the time. War after war after war after war. And it's this web that is driving these wars. This is why there is always money for war. Because the web is deciding what governments spend money on, and they want the war. So no one ever says, we can't go to war, we can't afford it. General Wesley Clark, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, he was interviewed in 2007, and he said that immediately after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon and was told by a general friend of his in the so-called Joint Chiefs of Staff that the decision had been made that America was going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. And the countries he named were the countries named by the Project for the New American Century in September 2000.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years."
Number 1, Bush, Republican, Blair, Labour, picked Iraq off the list because that's what they were told to do. And Iraq, of course, was invaded through weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist because it was on the list. It had to be targeted. They didn't have an excuse. They made one up. Then there's this transformation. Now, if we go from Labour to Cameron, David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, Conservative, and we go from Republican Bush to Democrat Obama. But what do? They tick Libya off the list, again, based on a lie, and they start the process to create the civil war in Syria. Now, Drain the Swamp Man comes in, and he's targeting Syria and more targeting Iran.
Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction. They do not respect their neighbors or borders or the sovereign rights of nations. Instead, Iran's leaders plunder the nation's resources to enrich themselves and to spread mayhem across the Middle East and far beyond.
The hidden hand is calling the shots. They come and they go. Where they want it to lead, if we let them, as I've been saying and writing since the 1990s, is World War III. They always plan 3 world wars. And what they want to do is play off NATO against Russia, China, and allies like Iran. And that's what this is all about, this insane demonization of Russia that goes on day after day after day. They're seeking to soften up global public opinion, Western public opinion, to accept a war. This is why you're having this massive NATO buildup of arms and troops on the borders of countries that border Russia.
Next, leaders from NATO countries met in Poland today to finalize plans to beef up the military alliance. For the first time since the Cold War, multinational troops will continuously rotate through 4 countries in Eastern Europe.
Russia has called this buildup a provocation. Is this a provocation?
I would view it as a deterrent. And if I was looking at it through the lens of a potential aggressor, I would say it's an exceptionally capable deterrent.
You've got all these troops, American troops, British troops, that think they're fighting for their country, where what they're doing is fighting for that force which is destroying their country and is aimed to create a nightmare world for their kids and their grandkids. If you keep invading countries like Iraq, then people will look up from the game show and go, hey, Ethel, they're invading someone else. What's going on? So what you do is you get the population, or some of it, in the target country to unseat the leader you want to remove. And this is the specialization of a group of organizations called the Open Society Foundations, run by this billionaire Democon, George Soros. They were behind the manipulation of the Arab Spring. That went well for Arabs, didn't it, that? And they are behind what are called color revolutions, like the Rose Revolution in Georgia and the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, where they get the people to appear to have a revolution against the leader, but actually that's not what's really going on. Now, a few weeks ago now, George Soros announced that he was going to transfer $18 billion to his Open Society Foundation group, bringing his total donation so far to $32 billion. That's the kind of money that is there to be used to disrupt countries. And one of the Soros Open Society coups was in Ukraine, when they replaced President Yanukovych, that was looking to Russia, with this guy Poroshenko, who's a puppet of America. And the person who oversaw that was Victoria Nuland, Assistant Secretary of State for Eurasian Affairs, who is the wife of the co-founder of the Project for the New American Century, Robert Kagan. When you get deep in the rabbit hole, it's a very, very, very small world. And the trigger for all this sequence that we're still seeing unfold, was 9/11. And in that document in September 2000, it said that unless there was a new Pearl Harbor, then this process of regime change would necessarily be slow. In the words of the document, further, the process of transformation is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. And 1 year to the month after this was published, 9 months after the people that wrote it came to power with Bush, America had what Bush called at the time the Pearl Harbor of the 21st century, which started the whole sequence running. Know the outcome and you'll see the journey. This is why it's so important to uncover where they want to go, what their outcome is. Because once you know their outcome, seeing the steps every day towards that outcome are a doddle. But if you don't know the outcome, then these steps are now random. There seems to be no connection, but the outcome connects them. And this structure, this pyramid, is where it's all been leading. I call it the Hunger Games society. They want an elite 1% at its core, less than 1%, that dictate everything. They have all the wealth, they have all the power, they have control of the military, they have control of government, the whole shebang. At the bottom, they want the rest of humanity, basically. Even those who at the moment think they're doing okay, they've got some money in the bank, they've got a nice house and that stuff, none of this matters to me. If you're not in the 1%, they want that as well. And in between, they want this quite demonstrably unfolding around the world. Police state, actually in the end, police military state, to hold this status quo and to impose the will of the 1% on the population. The outcome is they want a world government, a world army, a world central bank dictating all finance, and a world electronic currency. This is why they are running around like headless chickens, trying to stop Brexit now. They never believed that anyone would vote again, to come out. Now they're trying to stop it, because the idea is more and more countries are sucked into the EU, not that anyone leaves. And it's because they want a police-military state where they both fuse that we're seeing the police look and act more and more like the military all the time. This is why a Pentagon program called 1033 is giving tanks to local police forces in America.
Someone has to explain why your local police department has gone from this to this.